is an absolute beast.
Good afternoon folks, welcome to Visordown. My name is Toad and today we are taking a little bit of a closer look at KTM's updated and new for this year Superduke 1390 Evo. This is the Superduke 1290R Evo, which is differentiated by the stock bike basically via the suspension system. So if you bag the Evo bike, that means you get fancy pants, WP, electronically adjusted semi-active suspension. The stocker, so the non-Evo bike, is £17,999 and the Evo, which is this one here with all the semi-active loveliness, is £19,599. So knocking on the £20,000 club. One door it is not knocking on quite yet is the 200 horsepower club. So the real update for this one is the engine has been altered. So KTM sort of telling us that there's around 60% of the internals and the externals of the engine are either updated or all new. So they've given it a bit more capacity, it's got a bit more torque and a little bit more power. You've got 107 foot-pound of torque and you've got 188 bhp, which is down on some of the other bikes in the sector. There's a lot of those hyper nakeds and super nakeds that have got 200 horsepower, over 200 horsepower, in fact Street Fighter V4 for example, and the Kawasaki ZH2. This though, it doesn't really feel like it needs any more power. In fact, I'm going to go as far as to say that some words that nobody ever uttered when they got off the previous generation 1290 was, I wish it had a bigger engine, I wish it had more power, because it was frankly a ludicrously fast, unbelievably powerful bike with torque all the way through the rev range that could rip your arms out the sockets at the slightest whiff of the throttle. KTM isn't going to let a little fat like that put them off, so they've boosted the engine's capacity, they've increased the mid-range torque and the top-end torque, and they've increased the power, and this is the net result. It is the frankly bonkers looking new Superduke 1390 Evo.
This has got to be quite possibly the most bonkers V-twin engine on God's green earth. It is an absolute sledgehammer of a unit, like nothing else really. The way it accelerates and the way it builds its power, you can feel that the bike is fighting against the traction control when you really open the throttle up. And it's the wheelie control and the traction control are just doing everything they can to limit the slip and to stop the front wheel from just flicking up in the air. It is completely wild.
I'm going to start with the suspension really, because that's the kind of the differentiator between the two bikes, is that semi-active WP suspension. It isn't the plushest setup that I've ever experienced, especially considering it has got that semi-active damping that kind of adjusts the ride based upon the way that you're riding, the riding mode the bike's in, and actually what's going on underneath the bike down at the wheels. It isn't the plushest. There are some setups out there that seem to deal with bumps and changes and undulations in the road surface a little bit better than the WP system. That said, it is sort of fully adjustable. You can dial into the TFT there and tweak around all the settings until your heart's content. So you could probably make it a slightly more compliant setup if you really wanted to. But on the standard road and sport and performance mode, it is quite a firm ride. Not harsh, but quite firm, just without some of the plushness that you find on bikes like the Street Fighter V4. So just going to talk very quickly about the braking system. So we have got top spec Brembo Stylema calipers up front, and we've got 320mm discs. You also get a very, very nice slinky Brembo MCS span and ratio adjustable front master cylinder, which has got a lovely, really nice lever feel to it, which I like a lot. Obviously with the braking system, you've got it hooked up to a really fancy high spec cornering ABS system as well. In the standard road mode, a little bit like with the traction control and the wheelie control in the road mode, I did feel that the front ABS was a little bit intrusive in road, and again, to get rid of that intrusiveness, you have to dial it out and go into one of the sport modes or the track mode to really sort of eliminate that intervention. It was just on a few downhill braking sections into faster corners, you pull on the front brake and you can just feel the ABS just starting to pulse away, which was a little disconcerting. So this bike has also got some extras on it. So this has got the adaptive brake light, which is an £89.70 option. It's got the quick shifter, which is a £316 option, which makes me wince because it's on every bike and it just needs unlocking by your local KTM dealer. It's also got the track pack, which is 425 quid. The suspension pro package, which is on the Evo only, which is 316 quid. That allows you to tailor the suspension settings a little bit more. more. It's got engine brake control, which is a £180 option, and it's got motor slip regulation, or MSR, which is about a £90 option that you can add on. So all those things, if you wanted to turn your 1290 Superduke R Evo into the ultimate track tool, for instance, you added all those on there, you are going to be probably around the £21,500 mark, which is putting it in the same sort of price range as Ducati's Street Fighter V4. So I've spoken about the suspension, I've spoken about the electronics. The engine of it is an absolute beast. It always was, it always will be. Like I said, I don't think anybody ever got off a 1290 and thought, I think it needs a bit more power, because it's not a statement that would ever have come out of my mouth after I hopped off one. You got 188 bhp, and like I said, you got 107 pound-foot of torque. So comparing that to the competition, Street Fighter V4 makes 208 bhp, the BMW M1000R I think makes 210 bhp, and the Kawasaki ZH2 makes 197 bhp from its 1000cc supercharged engine. One thing you won't notice if you went from one bike to the other is that this bike was down on power, because it's got so much torque all the way through the rev range, peaking at 107 foot-pound of torque. Because it's got all of that torque, you don't really notice that it's missing out on any power. In fact, it doesn't feel like it's missing out on any power. You can be really lazy with your gear shifts, you can short shift your way up the box, and it will still accelerate with all the urgency of a 200 plus bhp Super Naked. It is frighteningly fast, in all honesty. It's one of those bikes that when you hop off it, you turn around and you look at it and you think, do we really need all of that power? Is this too much for the road? And it's something that occurred to me earlier on, because we've done a bit of shooting today with a KTM 990 Duke, which we've also got on here for a review at Visordown. And when I get off the Superduke 1390 and get onto the 990, the 990 just feels like a much more usable thing to ride on real roads that we've been riding today, little B roads out here in the Northamptonshire countryside. It's much more usable, it's much more user friendly. The 990 already feels ridiculously fast. You've got a very, very well spec package there in terms of the chassis, the suspension and the engine of the 990. You've got all the same sort of advanced electronics that you've got on the 1390, but you can get a little bit closer to the bike's maximum performance, which I always think is really rewarding with a bike. If you can get it up to where you're using 90 or 99% of what the bike can actually do, it makes it a much more involving ride. This bike is very different to that. You always kind of feel like you're tiptoeing around the torque delivery and the power delivery. And in fact, if you put the bike in the standard road riding mode and you wind on the throttle, you will feel the engine just being really, really held back by the electronics. It was like the traction control and the wheelie control are always fighting with the bike's engine power and delivery to sort of keep the back wheel from spinning and to keep the front wheel on the floor. You have to go up into the sport or the performance or the track riding mode to remove those inhibitions, and then you do get the full whack of that 188 bhp. And that's when this bike starts to feel like it is a bit of a monster, especially on the roads that we're riding today. Really, if you want to exploit that level of performance, you are going to have to be going to a track, doing a track day somewhere like Silverstone here in Northamptonshire, a big wide sweeping circuit. That is going to be the place where you can actually exploit pretty much all of what the Superduke R Evo has got.
One thing I am noticing about this latest generation Superduke is that the riding position and the actual seat comfort seem to be, for me anyway, a little bit better than the previous bike. I never found the previous one to be that comfortable. I never quite felt at home in it. I don't know what they've changed, whether it's the handlebar position or the padding in the seat, but it just seems like a nicer place to sit for me.
So I mean, where does the Superduke R Evo fit into the segment, really, the Super Naked segment? You've got the really, really track focused, beautiful looking Ducati Street Fighter V4 S, which in my mind is probably the best handling on a track in terms of it's sinuous. It just feels like a naked Panigale, which is exactly what you'd expect. You've got the MT10 and the MT10 SP, which are they just make you want to ride like an idiot every time you get on them, because it's just such a fun bike. It's an absolute hooligan bike, and this is very similar to the MT10 in the way that it makes you ride. It feels intimidating, but at the same time it's got a playful side. It likes to lift the front, it likes to slide the back end into corners, and it's a bike designed for having fun on. but it has got that slight thing that whenever you're riding it, you always do feel a little bit intimidated, and it's basically all down to that engine.
KTM have also recently put a lot of work into really finessing all of the electronics on all of their models, and it's noticeably getting better and better. There was a time when KTM electronics, they felt very binary in the way that they were actuated, and they are getting much better. They're much more intuitive. The wheelie control on the latest generation Dukes, so the 990 and the 1390 that I'm riding here today, they've got a lot better. So now, instead of just chopping the throttle as soon as the front wheel goes in the air, the wheelie control will allow you to hold a wheelie at a set sort of position, and you can almost dial in exactly the amount of degrees that you want the front wheel to lift via the TFT. And while we're on the subject of the TFT, I'm not still 100% on this switch cube arrangement that we've got here. It's fairly fiddly, and it takes quite a lot of getting used to.
So there we have it, folks. That is our review of the new Superduke 1390R Evo. It's still just as bonkers as it always was. A little bit more expensive than the previous outgoing model, which is to be expected, but the addition of the WP semi-active suspension will be a very welcome addition for a lot of people. If you've liked that video, please don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you can stay up to date with all of Visordown's latest videos. And for the latest news, reviews and motorcycle features, get yourself over to Visordown.com.